This is Dr. Chris Clayton. Thank you for joining us in the 5th episode of Hypnosis Chat. I have with me a very special guest. This is Andrea Ferrara. She is a registered nurse. She's taking some tests to advance her career and her life. And we're going to be talking about testing today and studying and a couple other things. So thank you very much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We are in Reston, Virginia now. Shooting on location, so to speak. So tell me a little bit about what you do as a registered nurse.
As a registered nurse, I am working in reviewing medical records for correct utilization of services, for clinical documentation, for appeals and denials, and that's about it. And how a hospital utilizes the care that's given to the patient.
Okay. So, for example, if there's someone who's in the hospital, part of your job is to make sure they're getting the care that they need. And if they are denied care, you look into that also. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So now I understand that you're taking some testing for coding. Is that right?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about that, please.
Clinical coding has always been a goal of mine. I do have my registered nurse and my other certifications, but I was always fascinated about coding. And now, as a clinical documentation improvement specialist, coding now has merged within that area. So it is beneficial to take coding or to at least have a basic knowledge of it. And the coders that have the expertise really can assist in looking at the documentation, because the documentation is very important. It's important for first of all, for the patient, for the physician to get reimbursed, and for the insurer to pay, the correct amount of payment for appropriate services. So we have to look at severity of illness, and if they're meeting criteria, how they came in, and it's really a mixed. Delicate, I call it delicate procedure, because if things are missed, the insurer may not pay, and the hospital is not appropriately reimbursed.
So you're really helping people out if you're able to find mistakes or get things corrected. I mean, that could really cause a lot of trouble.
Yes, you have to be able to really read the record in detail and determine the status. And if there's a question, then you have to ask the physician. You have to clarify something, because to write an anemia, there's several portions to anemia. It's not just anemia. It could be hemophilia and that type of situation.
So, okay, and you got to make sure that it's got the right one on there. Or else the insurance might not be able to pay for it, or okay.
And the hospital loses the proper payment for that illness or that injury, or whatever happened to the patient.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about the tests that you're taking. My understanding is that the coding tests are some of the most difficult that you can take. So, exactly. What kind of information are you required to learn?
It is quite a bit of information that you have to know and you have to understand. It is challenging, because the physician writes down information and you have to read it, and it has to be coded correctly. It's really hard. It's really detailed. The books are filled with, I think it might be over 900
Wow.
detailed information on maybe 3 numbers,
Wow.
and then it extends 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 numbers,
Mhm.
and it has to be specifically matched to the diagnostic
Sure.
statement, and each code identifies something different. So the beginning code might just say arrest, cardiac arrest, but it goes down to different types of arrest.
Mhm.
So it could be 4 or 5 things, and it's the coder's job to specifically find the information and make it correct in the chart so that the reimbursement from the insurer
Is
is
correct.
correct.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're working with a lot of detailed, abstract information.
Yes, it's not too abstract.
Oh,
It's
good.
very, very detailed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a book here to show, but it's very detailed. As I said before, anemia is just not anemia. It might be, different pernicious anemia or, some other type of anemia. So it has to be very specific. So when the coder looks at it, she has to make sure that she has the correct information in the chart.
Okay. All right. Good. So, okay. So, and how long have you been studying for the coding tests?
It's been about 4 months.
Okay.
4 months.
And one of the things that you may know about me is I help people with testing. I don't know nearly as much about coding as Mrs. Ferrara does. However, as far as testing is concerned, one of my special interests is optimizing performance activities. A performance activity is anything where you have to, perform, where you have to either give information or do an activity, whether it's mental or physical. The person could be an athlete, they could be a student. The bottom line is there is a zone of optimal functioning. Like athletes talk about being in the zone. And it's the same thing with students, or anyone studying something. You can be in the zone when you're studying and when you're testing, or you cannot be in the zone. It's kind of, if you're too low, you can kind of see it as a bell curve where the top is your optimal zone of functioning, where everything's moving along very quickly. It fits into your brain very easily. You're able to get it out later. And then you could be overactive, which is where a lot of people who are studying, if you become anxious, your performance will decrease. So if you're either underactive or you're overactive, either one of those two things will decline your performance.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there are a few things that I do to help students and test takers. But probably the most important one is being able to go into the zone when you're studying and when you're testing. Now, most people tend to think of the zone as being something that happens accidentally, but nothing in the brain happens accidentally. Your brain is a finely tuned machine that will give you the output based on the input that you give it. So, and part of my job is to help train people to use their brain on purpose. So, what I'd like to explore today is, how one would go about learning to go into the zone, both when you're studying and when you're testing. One other interesting note is that being in the zone is mutually exclusive to having anxiety, because if for no other reason, in order to go into the zone, you have to be at the right level of activation, not too high or too low. So when you go into the zone, you don't have anxiety and you don't have boredom. Like, it doesn't seem like a tedious chore. It doesn't seem like something that's anxious. One of the recurring themes of this show is finding that central, successful, motivating zone of optimal functioning where everything that you do your very best automatically. So tell you what, here's what I'd like for you to do, if you don't mind. Think back to a time that you were maybe trying to study, and for whatever reason it wasn't working. The information wasn't sinking in. Do you have a time like that you can think of?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So And I think you will notice that your brain was either underactive and you were kind of seeing it as like a tedious chore, or overactive and you were becoming anxious. Mm-hmm. Would you say that one of those two things were true? Which one would you say this particular instance? The tedious chore one or the anxiety one?
The anxiety.
Anxiety, okay. Mm-hmm. And one thing I found, here's one way that I like to explain what we're going to try to do. Let's say you're reading a book or some kind of reading material. That material goes at a certain pace, and it wants you to go at a certain pace. For example, if there's something that's denser, it requires a slower pace. If there's something that's lighter reading, it'll require a faster pace for optimal functioning. So what happens a lot of times is someone will get in their mind that they're going to go at a certain speed, but then it kind of, you're not going at the speed of the book, so you're going ahead faster than the information can sink in. When you do that, you're going to have to reread the paragraph, and you might not know why. So the bottom line is being able to identify the pace of the reading material is the first most important thing to being able to be able to optimize how fast you're learning it. So let's say, for example, and here, come up with another example. Let's say, I'm sure there was also a time when you were reading and it was sinking in. You felt like you were in the zone, right? And based on what we just talked about, you can probably identify that you are going at the same speed as the book. So you can remember that, right? So it's like when you have a clip, it's like if you have too much energy, you'll automatically kind of go at too fast of a clip. And if you're too unenergetic, you'll tend to go at too slow of a clip. But that doesn't have to necessarily stop you. You can actually, if you identify what the clip of the book is, like what is the optimal pace, it'll be kind of a smooth, steady pace that allows you to fill in the information without having any extra or extra time left over, or without missing anything. Does that make sense? So finding that pace, I think you will automatically start to go into it. So I'll tell you what, why don't, let's see, I'm looking at some books over there, and can I grab one of those books? Okay, this looks perfect. Okay, so I just picked a random page here. Let's see. So you can really tell just by looking. I'm willing to bet right now, here's my prediction. Based on what we talked about, I'm willing to bet that you can look at any paragraph in this whole book and instantly identify what the optimal speed is. I think everyone has that ingrained ability, but until you notice that ability, you're not going to use it automatically. So let me just pick I'm going to pick this page right here. Okay, so here's what I want you to do. Go ahead and read that paragraph, and I bet even before, oh, I'm sorry, that's right. I told her she wasn't going to have to read anything, so she didn't have to bring her glasses. Can you read that?
No, I could grab my glasses.
Oh, okay. Tell you what, why don't you go grab your glasses? I think this will be a good experiment. So that's okay. Take your time. Take your time. So what we're going to do is, I think that every single person watching this today has the ability, the inborn ability, to look at any piece of writing, any mathematical equation, any part of history, any history book, and look at it and just kind of read it and be able to tell instinctively how quickly, what the optimal pace is for reading it. And you could tell right away, once you become aware of that feeling of going too fast or too slow, you'll know right away, oh, that feels right. When you go at the pace that feels right, you will only have to read the information once. It will sink in at the maximal possible rate, and you will recall it better than you ever have before. I think there's other skills related to studying and testing, but I think the number one skill is reading something at the correct rate for you. And that could change based on, maybe you're fatigued and you need to go a little slower. Maybe you're that day and you can go a little bit quicker. the one thing that will tell you whether you can go faster or slower is how you feel when you're reading it. So you're reading it, is it going in at the optimal pace? Am I learning things and ready to move on? Or am I unconsciously just kind of rushing through it? Or am I just too tired to process it? I can't even get to the end of the sentence without learning everything. Okay, so here, tell you what, this is the one that I randomly picked out. And just kind of read that to yourself, like silently. And I'm willing to bet that even before you're done with the first sentence, you'll get a feeling for how fast, what the optimal speed. Yeah, immediately, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, like immediately. And just by having that awareness, knowing that there is an optimal pace and that you can use your feeling, your sort of mental feeling, to guide you on how fast you can go and let you know if you're going too slow or too fast. Just by doing that, I think that you will improve your recall, your retention 10 times. It's like, someone imagine like we took a car back to, before they had cars, like the 1700s. And there were smart people back then, but they'd never seen a car before. Maybe saw a horse and carriage and put them on a road and didn't put any lines on it. It's just a big wide road. They would not stay. We would see them as like weaving back and forth because we're used to looking at lines. So the bottom line is, when you don't have this guide, when you don't notice something, when you don't know how to imagine something, it's easy to go too slow or too fast or weave back and forth. But once you're aware that this feeling, this sort of optimal in the zone feeling is the main thing that will determine how efficiently you can absorb and retain information, you will use it automatically.
During testing, when the information is as detailed and requiring as much specificity as the coding takes, you have a tendency to, even though you're prepared, you have a tendency to be a bit anxious. In some tests that I have challenged, you have to wait to settle down and, get yourself calm. And I try not to talk before so that I can try to fill my mind. But it is a pace, and you have to. That's why with testing, I try to arrive earlier to get settled and stuff. But there is a pace.
Yeah, definitely. And one other thing you said related to anxiety, whether or not you have anxiety is related to how you're in the habit of thinking about the activity. So let's talk about that for a second, because that's actually the other thing. Sort of the inverse of being in the zone is, for most people, being anxious. Most people's main problem with studying isn't that it's too tedious. That might be true with younger students, but by the time you're in college or grad school, hopefully you want to be there. And, and the same process will also apply to someone who has a tedious problem as far as their studying is concerned. But right now we're really going to focus on people who are very motivated, who really want to learn something, and they want to optimize how efficiently they're learning. That's kind of what today is about. So just to focus on that for a minute. So anxiety. So tell you what, and this is something that is one of my favorite things to talk about. Your brain only has 3 states. You can be comfortable, in the middle, successful, motivational, or you can be overactive or underactive. Overactive's anxious, underactive would be like bored. So this is a common theme. Those are the only 3 states the brain can have. Likewise, there's only 3 ways you can think about any activity: in the motivational, successful way, in an anxiety-producing way, or in a tedium-producing way. So, for example, and we're just going to focus on anxiety for a minute. There's we could talk for weeks about this otherwise. So there's a primary difference, and it's actually a very simple little difference between thinking about something in a motivational way and thinking about something in an anxiety-producing way. For example, so I want you to think of something that you're already motivated to do. You have no anxiety about it. You like doing it. It's just a normal thing you enjoy doing. Got something like that?
Actually,
quite a few things, I'm sure, right? What's one thing that you enjoy doing that you're already motivated to do? Could just be something as simple as brushing your teeth, or anything at all.
I do like embroidery.
Great. Okay, so you like embroidery. You look forward to it.
I look forward to it. I have a couple of pictures.
Oh, great. Okay.
In the house that I've done. I like reading. I like learning new things.
Good. Okay, so let's take one of those. We'll just say embroidery, because that's pretty concrete. I'm willing to. So think about embroidery. I'm willing to bet that when you think about embroidery, you're thinking about you're in the middle of doing it. As you're imagining it, you're in the middle of doing it, and you're doing it successfully. Is that right? So it's in the present. You're doing it successfully. That is just the normal way that everyone thinks about things that they like and that they're good at and they're already motivated to do. See, and one of the most important principles is you're never, no activity is inherently tedium producing or anxiety producing. Every activity is just neutral. It's just the activity. It's what we do up here that makes it motivational, tedium producing, or anxiety producing. So now, on the other hand, think about something that makes you feel anxious. It could be testing, something like that produces anxiety. Again, remember that the activity itself does not produce anxiety. How we represent it in our mind is what creates anxiety. So, are you thinking about the testing right now? Okay.
Yes.
And, okay. So, if you're thinking about it in an anxiety-producing way, I'm willing to bet that you're imagining doing the test and something going wrong, or there being some kind of bad consequence, or maybe it's too hard, or maybe you're looking at it, you don't recognize any of the answers, or maybe you run out of time. Is something like that the case?
Yeah. Because some of the tests are long, 5 hours, 40 minutes, you get anxious. Anxiety.
Okay, and so they're long. So what does that mean? You won't be able to last the whole time, or maybe you'll
run out of time.
Run out of time, or something like that. Okay. And the interesting thing was, just a little aside, I was talking with Anjali less than an hour ago about how things in the psychological field sometimes seem overly simple. In this case, it seems overly simple that things we like, we imagine doing successfully, and things we don't like, we imagine something going wrong. Well, that's simple. Anyone could say that. And the thing that makes this important is that even though it's that simple, we still make those mistakes all the time. So the important point, again, is that's why I emphasize so much that the activity is not creating it. What's going on up here is creating it. And you have control of what's going on up here. I think that's really the key that is not obvious, that you have control over what you think. Even when I say it that way, it still seems obvious, doesn't it? So it's like all the pieces seem 100% obvious, but for some reason, people aren't aware that you could put all those pieces together. So, and that's kind of what my job is. So now I want you to try this. Okay, so first of all, recognizing that the way you think about testing is not true or false. It's not right or wrong. It's not even good or bad. It is only more or less useful for getting the feeling that you want. So since it's not right or wrong, you might as well get the feeling that will help you the most. It's only more or less useful for what you want to accomplish. So you might as well think about it in the way that helps you the most. You'd agree with that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do this. And the reason I make a big deal out of that is that most people have the unconscious idea that what they're used to is true and what the new idea is not true. Of course, we wouldn't say that out loud or think it consciously because it doesn't necessarily make sense, but we have that idea like, oh, I've been thinking this my whole life. It must be true. And then you view with suspicion any new kind of ideas. So, get that out of your mind. Every way you can think about something is not true or false. It's just a tool for feeling the way you want to feel. In this case, confident and successful.
Yeah.
Because when you're confident, you will actually perform better. It lets you go into the zone. You'll think more clearly. You remember things better. Anxiety is energy, and it saps energy from you, and you're not able to use that energy to fuel your memory. So being in the best state of mind will actually really help you, as opposed to just feel good. So, okay. So with all that said, I want you to make these two ways of thinking about testing. Number one is the old way, the old anxiety-producing way, where you're imagining, oh, it's really long. You know, for example, when you think of embroidery, you don't think, oh, that's really long.
No.
But it probably takes longer to embroider something than the test, right?
So.
You know, I don't know how long it takes, but it probably takes way longer than a test. Okay. So, but, and even though that's true, you don't think that, because, and that the way you think will determine how you feel. So, number one, we'll get rid of that, the idea of the test being long, because it's not long compared to embroidery, and you do that just fine. Okay. So, all right. So here's what I want you to do. The elements of thinking about something in an anxiety-producing way are imagining being there and all the things that could go wrong, or imagining them actually going wrong or having some kind of consequence. So we're just going to make a little skeleton of how you're going to think about it. It's going to be kind of the same way you think about embroidery. In fact, let's talk it out for a minute. So think about embroidery. You like doing that. You're motivated to do it. Just kind of give me a little rundown. Play the movie in your head of what you normally think of. So would you like to do some embroidery, or when's the next time you're going to do embroidery? Talk me through your train of thought about that.
When I really want to relax, I think about first, what can I do that's short in embroidery, because I want to do it, but I want to do it really well. So I want to take a small piece, and sometimes it's really bigger, you know. And I start to prepare. You know, I get my needle out, my thread, and I'm getting prepared for the test. I set up my big embroidery wheel, and you know, I get comfortable. I listen to music, and you know, pick my threads, and then I start.
Okay. No, I'm noticing some great things, and I'll share those with you in just a second. Before I do that, I want you to now think about the test. Okay, now talk me through that. And don't worry about what we've said so far. I just want you to tell me about your old way of thinking. Just talk me through it.
Okay, so for testing,
make me feel it.
For testing, I am so anxious. It's unbelievable. I want to arrive there 1 hour before. I want to look at my books. I want to correct things in my mind so that when I see it, you know, I wanted to, you know, be able to pick it first. I am not relaxed. I'm tense and, you know, anxious. I'm hoping I don't miss something even before I get to it. And very often I do not scan the whole thing before I start.
I've noticed already 3 things that are wildly different between that and thinking about embroidery. Number one is the size. You're imagining this test being this big, gigantic test, and it's up here. It's out of control. Embroidery, it's right here in a nice, contained, easy to look at thing. You notice that? Okay, so first thing I want you to do is take the test and put it here where it belongs. Okay, the test is not some big thing. It's just this thing in front of you right here. It's the same size as embroidery. Okay, that feels a little better, doesn't it? Less overwhelming. It's just right there. That's all. And the next thing I noticed was you think about, with the testing, you think about yourself. Where the embroidery, it's all about the embroidery. Exactly. Whenever you think about yourself or the other people, this is another week-long discussion that we'll probably have at some point. When you think about yourself or other people, it creates anxiety. When you think about the topic or the subject, it creates confidence. Okay, that's just a little preview of a future day. So don't worry about yourself. You're fine. Nobody else matters. It's just the test. Okay, and then the third thing is you think about embroidery in a step-by-step way. Like first, I get this stuff. Then I do this, and you can see yourself doing each step successfully. First, I'll select my threads, then I'll do this thing, and then I'll put it together, and then I'll have this. Okay, let's do that with the test. Okay, now again, none of this is true or false.
Right.
You can think about it any way you want, so you might as well pick the way that makes you feel the best so that you can be in the zone. Okay, so you've got your test. First thing you do is you write your name down, fill it out. You look through the questions. You recognize the information from what you learned. You start going through it. Maybe you skip the harder ones and do the easy ones and come back. Or maybe your system is to go all the way through. Whatever your system is, you get through, you finish it up. You've answered all or almost all the questions. You've got some time left over. You finish everything up, make your best guesses. You feel good about it. You turn it in. Do you notice how that creates a lot less anxiety?
Yes,
Okay.
I do. And as a matter of fact, uh, that's exactly how you're supposed to handle, the test. And unfortunately, even though you're prepared and you have anxiety, it's kind of hard.
Okay. Here's what I want you to. And we are gonna have to close up here pretty soon.
Okay.
But this is what I want to. It's only hard if you think the wrong thing and then try to correct it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've already generated the anxiety, it can be hard to get rid of the anxiety.
Okay.
So the most effective way to do it is to go in thinking about it the correct way. Okay. So from now on, this whole old idea of big test, lots of time, long test, don't know, all that's gone. Okay. It's gone. The only way you think about tests from now on, including before the test, whenever I say, oh, hey, when's your test? You think, oh, there's a test. You think about it in the embroidery way. Okay. So you've got the test, you fill it out, you recognize, maybe you answer the easy ones first, and then maybe you go back and answer the other ones. On the last couple, you make your best guesses, you feel good about it, you turn it in.
That's
okay.
Exactly what.
Okay. So you have control over that, and you're the only one that has control over that. Okay. We have thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. The only thing that you truly have control over are your thoughts. Your feelings come naturally from your thoughts, and your behaviors come naturally from your feelings. So from now on, number one, it's not happening to you. You're doing it. So it's your responsibility, which is great because that means you can change it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So with great responsibility comes great power, and that's what you have. Okay. So from now on, every time you think about the test, you take control. You are the leader of your brain, and you take control and say, okay, it's the test. The test is right here. It's not everywhere. It's right here. It has a certain number of finite steps. It doesn't have a billion steps that take forever. Mm-hmm. It's got X number of finite steps. You might have a 3 to 5 step process, like go through and answer the easy ones, go back and recheck, whatever your process is. You're just going to run the test through your process. You already have the process. You've used it hundreds of times probably in the past. You run the test through your process. You've already studied. You recognize the information. You turn it in and you feel good about it. From now on, that's the only way. And you owe that to yourself because that will maximize your performance. You're not going to be clogging up your memory or draining your memory by having anxiety. Okay, does that sound good?
That's great.
Okay.
I thank you. That's
okay, great.
Okay,
well, we have to cut it off now. Obviously, there's lots more to talk about in this topic, but hopefully everyone gained something from this. Thank you very much. So. Yes. Thank you very much for joining me. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
And
Thank you.
And we will look forward to seeing everyone next week. Take care.